So I want to acknowledge that we're speaking from the lands, unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, the COQUITLAM, the Squamish, and the Musqueam nations. For me, it's important to do a land acknowledgement, not just as words, but in publicly reaffirming my commitment to the journey of truth and reconciliation, of hearing new histories and learning about the lands upon which I've had the privilege throughout my life to live, work, and play on.
So just a little bit about ISSofBC. ISSofBC was created in 1968 by volunteers, and it was incorporated in 1972 in response to the Ismailis fleeing East Africa. We are the first immigrant serving agency in BC and one of the largest multicultural immigrant serving agency in Canada. We've pioneered a variety of settlement services, host programs, and refugee reception in BC. We're the third refugee resettlement center in Canada. We've served over 25,000 clients per year in over 45 languages in over 16 primary locations, as well as secondary locations where staff are deployed in different community partners or agencies. We have over 400 staff and volunteers. We're both a charity and an NGO, and our board directors are selected from a broader community. So a little bit about our objectives today are threefold. One, we want to provide a better understanding of the refugee process and identifying some of the unique aspects of the Afghan Special Initiative that impacts resettlement in Canada. Provide updates of the GARS, Government Assisted Refugees Arrivals, to Metro Vancouver. Share early settlement patterns and speak to how you can help. So first, wanted to explain a little bit about the normal GAR, Government Assisted Refugees process prior to traveling to Canada. Often, prior to coming to Canada, paperwork is completed, which includes applications and forms necessary for them to obtain permanent residencies. This includes medical exams and application review, as well as Canadian orientation abroad is provided prior to travel. When they travel to Canada, it includes a number of steps, which is provided by IOM, CBSA, and programs such as CAN to ensure safe and organized travel to Canada. So some of the things that is different for the Afghans that came to Canada, and it's created some complexities as the Afghans have arrived to Canada. Given the urgent need to respond to the situation that was happening in Afghanistan, it was not possible for individuals to complete the required immigration process, the medical exams prior to arriving to Canada. Rather, people were put on planes as quickly as possible. And so individuals were brought to Canada under the Urgent Protection Program, which allowed Canada to respond to the urgent request by refugees under the threat of being returned to their home, expulsion, or facing direct threats to their lives. Urgent Protection Program, UPP cases, are designated as government-assisted refugees once the processes are completed in Canada. So as I said, the typical process is done overseas, but because of the urgent need of bringing Afghans to Canada, a lot of the processes were done in Canada. In this case, most of the processes were done in Toronto and onward destiny to communities based on whether they had presence of family or friends in those areas. This has created some challenges in the arrival of Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and blended families in those flights. Many arrived because of the urgent need of leaving. Many arrived without even the change of clothing. In Canada, these groups have different eligibility, services and supports, including airfare to final destination, provincial health coverage, whether they're eligible for IFH, what the waiting period for medical supports with provinces, and ongoing supports even within families. So a lot of the process, as I said, the forms were not completed overseas. They needed to be completed in Canada. And so where they were brought directly to Canada by Government of Canada, the forms are completed in Toronto. Most of them have been completed in Toronto. However, in some cases, people are making their own way to Canada on their own accord, arriving at agencies across provinces. So what may be happening is you are seeing individuals who have come to BC who have not completed the process of becoming permanent residents or the forms required to that. If this happens, the forms that are listed here must be completed and submitted to IRCC. The first two links are very important because it provides information of who requires these forms, who should apply the checklist, what's required to completing these forms. So as people, the typical process for people who have arrived to BC, whether they are destined from Toronto to British Columbia, or they have completed the government-assisted refugee process from overseas to BC, is they are greeted at the airport by CAN, where they're taken on a taxi or by bus to temporary accommodation. And this could be Welcome Center at ISSofBC, or in some cases, we have temporary accommodation in hotels. They are greeted by ISSofBC staff, assigned to their rooms, and provided cash on the first night. During the first night of arrival, they are given a chance to rest, sort of, as you understand, coming from a new place, needing the time to just sort of decompress, relax, rest, have a good night's sleep. The second day, day two, is when they meet the first language counselor, who then provides a consent form, provides a variety of different forms that may be required during this process. This includes the intake, bank forms, consent form, as I've mentioned, and providing them with the orientation schedule. As newcomers, as RAP GAR clients, GARS, they receive orientation through the RAP program. And I'll talk a little bit about some orientation in just a moment. They also meet with the ISSBC housing worker, because one of the objectives of the RAP assistance program is finding permanent accommodation, as well as they receive food cash for them during their stay in temporary accommodation. From day 3 to 14, a variety of things happen during this process. This includes orientation. Orientation includes welcoming them to BC, providing orientation on housing, financial budgeting, and living in BC. They are also provided orientation on coping with change, as you can imagine, coming from overseas or to a new place, and how the change happened, providing them with tools and ways of taking care and acknowledging that change is a normal process of what's happening. Immigration and Refugee Citizenship Canada, IRCC intake is also completed during this time, and this begins a process of receiving RAP's support. As well as we open up bank accounts with the clients, and a primary health examination is also happening during this period. As I've mentioned, they are introduced to a housing search worker, and permanent housing search begins in this time, with clients asking them if they have family or friends to help with housing needs, as well as community. One of the things is housing is very important so that people are able to move and settle into their life in Canada. And so the housing search worker, and sometimes with the help of a housing search volunteer, shows them the options that's available, and so they can see what housings may be best suited for their family and their needs. Once housing has been identified and they accept it, then we also work with them to sign the lease or the housing agreement, and arrange for furniture delivery or move-in. So this is typically a process of 2 weeks. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer just due to finding housing, but the ideal situation is about 2 to 3 weeks. So prior to making referrals to the community, there's a number of things that are completed during their stay at the Welcome Center or temporary accommodations, such as hotels. And some of this was completed for the Afghans in particular, were completed overseas, in Toronto. But if not, for other GARs, it's completed overseas. So IRCC processing and destining has been completed. They have had their immigration medical exam, which includes essential health emergency services, standardized immunizations to prevent serious and medical and dental conditions. It may include contraceptions, prenatal and obstetric cares if needed, prescription drugs, not over-the-counter drugs. Social insurance number is also has been provided, or the forms have been completed. They have received COVID vaccination should they choose to accept the COVID vaccination. And that's often the first shot. Second shot, if they've never had it prior, may require that to be completed in the community. During the stay of temporary accommodation in quarantine for the Afghans, they receive provisions of tablets, so they are able to access services while they are in quarantine. So as I mentioned earlier, some of the orientation that was able to provide to them while they were in quarantine, so that they were able to learn and understand some of the processes in Canada and in BC. Initial orientation and basic needs has been provided. We also completed a needs and assets assessment to understand the arrivals much better and what their needs are. Applications to MSP, child tax benefit, and GSTs are completed. IRCC's intakes and issuance of the first wrap checks have been provided. Clients have had their bank accounts open. They have permanent housing has been found as because they are moving to the community. And referrals are made to the appropriate resources based on the needs and asset assessment. So this may be language schools, school for children, settlement services, our connections are made to them.
So as we continue, what we wanted to do is begin to talk a bit about who has come to BC through the government, and I should have changed this to Metro Vancouver. We want to focus on Metro Vancouver. Looking at the GAR arrivals who have come. We're focusing on the period of August 23rd to today because that's when the first arrivals through the Afghan Special Initiative came to Metro Vancouver. But as we do so, we want to tell a bit of a story because unlike Operation Syrian Refugee, where when Syrians started arriving in Canada, they were really largely the only group that was coming through the government's assisted refugee program. And the important thing to know about as we move over the next few months and the next few years is that although we will have large numbers of individuals coming through the Afghan Special Initiative, we'll continue to receive our regular arrivals of non-Afghan GARS. So in essence, we have a dual stream of arrivals who are coming through. And I think anytime that we talk about refugee resettlement in BC, we need to be thinking about that, and we need to just be aware that these are not the only individuals who are coming, and that as we're preparing our communities, as we're looking at impacts on services, what supports do we need, it's important that we have that knowledge of both groups who are coming. And you'll see as we move forward over many of the next slides, we're going to be talking about both Afghans and non-Afghans who have come to Metro Vancouver. So looking specifically at Afghan arrivals to BC, and largely most of the individuals who have come to BC through the government program to date have settled in Metro Vancouver. To date, from August 23rd to December 6th, we have 445 Afghan GARS who have come within 127 family units. One of the things just to remember is a family unit under IRCC, anybody who is 18 or older would have their own family unit. So an actual family household could be made up of multiple units in terms of this language. Including non-Afghan GARS, during the same period, we've received 701 GARS overall, and that's 203 units since August 23rd. At this point, looking at Afghans specifically, we anticipate multiple modes of arrival for future GARS. And this includes centralized ports of entry and quarantine hotels. Currently, they're set up in Calgary, largely for individuals who are transiting to Canada via the United States, and Toronto. And this is largely for others who are arriving through the government-assisted refugee channels. But we also know that individuals may come to Canada through the Afghan Special Initiative of their own accord, arriving at land borders or direct flights for individuals who have arranged their own travel to Canada. In terms of the government-assisted refugees and the timing of future arrivals to Canada and subsequently to BC, we really have very little information. There's a lot of work being done overseas, in Ottawa, in Vancouver, and across the country to look at the timing of newcomers and as people can get the travel visas to come here. When we look at the Afghan arrivals to Metro Vancouver, approximately 55% of the individuals who have arrived to date are under the age of 19, and 16% are under school age. So we will see a fairly significant impact on schooling, and we need to make sure that school systems, early childhood development programs are accessible. Approximately 60% of the Afghans who have arrived speak Dari as a primary language, followed by Pashto with 36%, but a number speak other languages, including Urdu, Hindi, and Persian and Farsi. In terms of the composition of the units who have arrived, we see a large number of people who have come as singles, but again, may be attached to other family units. But about 38% of the families who have arrived to date are family units of 5 or more people. So when we're looking for housing, we're often looking for larger units and needing to ensure that we can find housing and get people into their housing as quickly as possible. One of the things we get asked often is who's coming to our community, who's settling in our city. And when we look at finding permanent accommodations, approximately 80% of all of the GARs who have arrived during this period have secured permanent housing. When we look at the individuals who are in temporary accommodations still, about 71% of those individuals have arrived in the last 3 weeks. So contrary to what may be, you may be hearing on the news, we are finding housing for newcomers and getting them into the communities there where they can begin to find housing, pardon me, they can begin to settle into their lives in Canada. So registering their children for schools, accessing linked classes, in some cases obtaining employment. So this is, for us, a very good news story. What we want to do now is, as we look forward, we're going to look overall at the demographics of individuals who have arrived. And again, we want to largely talk about the story of Afghans, non-Afghans, and the overall impacts of who's coming. We're going to talk at the broadest level in terms of all who have come during this period, and then focus, spend a few slides focusing on specific cities and who's settling in those communities.
Sure. So GARS in permanent accommodation. So in terms of Afghan GARS that have arrived to BC, we have had 108 units or 373 individuals. Non-Afghans would be 43 units, 137 individuals. So a total of 151 units, 510 individuals. So 85% percent of arrivals, percent of arrivals, 85% have found housing for the Afghan population. And then you can see the top languages. Dari, as Kathy mentioned earlier, is about 62%, Pashto and Persian / Farsi. And of course, top countries, Afghanistan. For the non-Afghans, about 63% of the arrivals have found permanent accommodation. And so we can see that there's a variety of language, the top one being Arabic, 66%, Somali being number 2. And again, as well, you can see the country of origins is varied. Syria being the top one right now, 53%, Somali number 2, 12%, Iraq 10%. And then that shows you sort of the top languages overall for all government-assisted refugees, whether they're from Afghan or non-Afghan. Dari number 1, Pashto number 2, and Arabic number 3. In terms of age breakdown, you can see that with the Afghan, about 16% are under the age of 5, 40% are at school age, and then 19 to 64 4 years old is 44%, and under 1% is 65 years and older. It's about 50-50 in terms of gender for Afghans. With regards to the non-Afghans, we see that it's about 10% who are under the age of 5, 51% that are school aged, 39% between 19 to 64, and as well about 1% who are 65 years and older, and again 50-50 mix. So overall, in terms of government assisted refugees in permanent accommodations, 14% are under the age of 5, 43% are school age, 43% about 19 to 64 percent are 1964 years old.
So perhaps unsurprisingly, the top city of settlement, regardless of whether we're looking at Afghans or non-Afghans during this period, has been Surrey. So as we start to provide more detailed information on early settlement patterns, we wanted to start looking at cities specifically. Surrey has welcomed 65 units or 241 individuals who are Afghan, and that accounts for 65% of all of the GARS who have arrived and have obtained permanent housing during this period. Dari, Pashto, and Persian Farsi are the main languages. When we look at non-Afghans, Surrey has welcomed 22 units with 75 individuals, accounting for 55% of all the non-Afghan GARS during this period who have obtained permanent housing. And we see the diversity in terms of countries of arrival. So although Arabic continues to be the primary language, we also see fairly large numbers of Somali, Spanish, Tigrinya, and Swahili speaking individuals. The top countries of origin: Syria, Somalia, Iraq, El Salvador, Honduras. So again, speaking to the diversity of who is settling in our communities. In total, Surrey has welcomed 87 units or 316 individuals. Dari, Pashto, Arabic, Somali, and Spanish are the top languages. And we see the countries, over 3/4 are from Afghanistan. But again, we see large numbers from Syria, Somalia, Iraq, and El Salvador. When we look at the age breakdown, Afghan 15% are under the age of 5. 43% are of school age, so looking at from 5 to 18. Among non-Afghans, we see lower numbers of children under the age of 5. But we see higher numbers who are school age. Overall, 14% are 0 to 4 within Surrey, and 44% are of school age.
Okay, so with Vancouver, in terms for the Afghan GARS, it's about 13 units, about 43 individuals. So about 12% of those who arrived have found permanent accommodations in Vancouver. And the top 3 languages, Dari, Pashto, and some who speak Persian and Farsi. In terms of non-Afghans, we have 1 unit, 4 individuals. So it's about 3% of the arrivals have moved to Vancouver, 100% Dari speaking, but they are from Iran. And so that shows that the total of 14 units, 47 individuals have settled in Vancouver, city of Vancouver, with the top language being 70% speak Dari, Pashto, and from Afghanistan or Iran. In terms of the age breakdown, for those who settled in city of Vancouver, 23% are under the age of 5, and 26% are school age. Little less, but close to 50%, 46% are females. With non-Afghan, 75% are under the age of 19, and 25% are within the age of 19 to 64. Again, the breakdown for total is 21% are under the age of 5 years old, and 29% are school-age children.
So as we look at some of the top from number 3 to number 6 in terms of cities, we've changed up the approach, and in part that's based on wanting to not provide a lot of detailed information when you have non-Afghan families who are less than 4 or 5 units. So Burnaby was the #3 settlement city over the last 3.5 months. They've welcomed 13 units, 29 individuals, and accounts for about 6% of all of the housing that's been found for GARS during this period. And again, I really want to stress when we're talking about these numbers, these are looking at totals as opposed to Afghan only or non-Afghan only. The top languages are Dari, Pashto, Spanish, and Tigrinya. Afghanistan accounted for 90% of the individuals who are settling in Burnaby, but also El Salvador and Eritrea. And we see about 7% of individuals who are settling there are ages 0 to 4, and about 34% are of school age. Delta has welcomed 3 units or 24 individuals, and that's about 5% of the individuals who have found housing. Arabic, Pashto, and Dari are the top languages. And countries of origin are Afghanistan and Syria. And again, we see about 12% are under the age of 5, but 63% are of school age.
Okay. So in terms of numbers for people who have moved to COQUITLAM, about 8 units and 21 individuals have moved to COQUITLAM. That's about 4% of all arrivals who have found settled in COQUITLAM. So the language that's top language is Dari, but there's also about 24% who speak Amharic. And in terms of country of origin, we have about 76% who are from Afghanistan and 24% from Ethiopia. In terms of the age breakdown, about 19% are under the age of 5 years old and 39% are of school age. Slightly higher in terms of more females within who have arrived in COQUITLAM. The other city that we have people who have settled is New Westminster. 10 units or 18 individuals have settled there. So that's about 4% of all the GARs that arrived between August 23rd and December 6th. 50% of them speak Dari, 28% Farsi, and the other languages that also include Amharic and Arabic. 78% are from Afghanistan. Other countries include Ethiopia and Iraq. But under the age of 5 years old, it's about 11% and 33% are school age. And again, slightly higher in terms of females, from to the West.
So I think as we're looking at the numbers overall, one of the things that struck me was we're seeing certainly some of the primary settlement cities that we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years, Surrey, Burnaby, New West, Vancouver, but we're also seeing new communities in terms of Delta, for example, and we're seeing differences in terms of our ability to settle people there. There's also been newcomers in very small numbers who are settling in other communities, so Langley, Maple Ridge, Pitt Meadows. So as we look at our communities, there is a diversity of people who are coming, and it really attempts to be settling people into housing that meets their needs throughout Metro Vancouver.
So what are our current needs to support newly arrived Afghans and even government-assisted refugees in general? One of the things is permanent accommodation. Housing units at income assistance rates for families between 1 to 9 people are very important. Shelter allowance, which is what is the basis for the housing, is $375 to $890 for family of 9. They receive a top up in year 1, but then afterwards, if they have not employed, they move into income assistance. And housing is a very important piece of people for settling because it allows them to move into the community, begin their lives. So this allows them to begin looking for language classes, for their children to attend school, and for themselves to find employment. So that is a huge priority. What we're asking is if you know of any affordable housing that can, house individuals or families from 1 to 9 or even larger sometimes, please contact us about these opportunities for the GARS to move it, because that's an important piece in settling in Canada, in BC and Metro Vancouver. The other things that would be beneficial in terms of helping newly arrived Afghan GARS and GARS in general is providing donations for gift cards. Gift cards allows the families to actually make purchases themselves. So it gives them the empowerment of to purchase what they feel they need for themselves and their family. It gives them the independence to choose whatever is necessary for them. And so that helps them in terms of if they need to buy more groceries, if they need more furniture, additional clothing, whatever, but it is their choice of what they want to purchase.
And I think when we look at gift cards, it's important to remember that ISSofBC, although that we are the Resettlement Assistance Program, we're the agency welcoming GARS when they come to BC, that there are multiple agencies across Metro Vancouver who are providing supports to these families once they move into permanent accommodations. So certainly gift cards is one where ISSofBC is collecting gift cards, but so are many other agencies across Metro Vancouver, again, providing once they're into permanent accommodations.
And the third thing that we've listed here is welcoming communities. Building welcoming communities is very important to welcome refugees. And ways to do that is by dispelling myths about refugees, sharing knowledge, helping people understand the refugee process, understanding what happens when they move into the communities, understanding what happens when they first arrive to Canada through resettlement program, and helping build connections with them so that they feel that they are welcome, included, part of the community. And that will benefit with settling and integration.
So I know we booked an hour and a half, but in the end, we wanted to keep it short, give people some time back in their days. So we tried to keep our presentation very streamlined. That's all we have, but if there's questions, we would be happy to answer. I'll just show, we've also got information, we'll publish our slides so people have the data. There's always additional information and training on ISSofBC site as well as the BC Refugee Hub. And if you have any questions that Jennifer or I can help with, please feel free to contact us. And I think, you know, for me, it's also a thank you. It's a thank you to certainly our funders, to the Government of Canada for bringing individuals to Canada during this crisis, to the province of BC for the BC Refugee Hub, and to all of you for the work that you do to support newcomers in the community.